start. This video is about spoilers. Hi everyone, in this video I want to talk about two things. One is spoilers and the second one, the way I pick the books to read. Let's start with spoilers. I absolutely hate spoilers. There is nothing that I hate more. If there is something that I absolutely love, say my favorite TV show like Sherlock or my favorite book series, I don't want to know a single thing. I avoid spoilers like plague. Whenever filming of Sherlock starts, and as you know, the fourth season started filming right now, I just go off social media. I don't check Tumblr. I avoid Twitter as much as I can, and even though I know that even if you go into specific tags, or if you block specific tags and you just stay only in something unrelated to, say, Sherlock, you'll still get spoiled. It happened to me before, and the only way to avoid spoilers is actually to get off social media like altogether. It's really hard for me, especially as I'm the person who is always on social media. Whenever it's YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. I'm a lot on Instagram these days, and I do still use Tumblr a lot. That's why for me being off social media is really difficult. But in terms of spoilers for books, unless someone reads a book and reviews it, and the review is not spoiler free, and I watch it on BookTube, there is basically no other way for me to get spoiled. And whenever I talk to my friends, they all know that I hate spoilers, and whenever they mention a book and they say, hey, I feel this type of story might be interesting for you, and I always go like, no, don't tell me anything, just tell me what type of genre that is and why you think that the book will appeal to me, but do not tell me the plot. Just do not mention anything whatsoever. I prefer to pick my books and go just dive into them completely blind. I'm not the type of person who picks up the books based on the summary. I barely read them. You know what? I don't read summaries at all. Whenever I browse in a bookstore, I usually just go for the authors that I heard of or the authors that I read previously. And whenever I see a book that just appeals to me and the cover is really pretty, or it just catches my eye, I always pick the book. I go and look at the back of the book, but whenever I read the summary, I just instantly forget it. Whenever I read the summary, I just cannot concentrate. Whenever I go into a bookstore, I just prefer to browse, just go like, oh, hey, I read this book before, or hey, here's a new book by the author that I read before. And I do enjoy being surrounded by books, but whenever I actually shop for books, I go already knowing that I'm looking for a specific thing. So whenever I'm in the bookstore, I just window shop. I window shop a lot in bookstores. I just enjoy being around books and being in the bookstores because I feel that they have a specific energy. And whenever I see a book, I just, you can write whatever you want in the summary. I'll probably will not read it, or I'll read it and just forget about it. How do I pick up the books? That's a very good question. I have my go-to genres, and that would be fantasy and crime, but it just depends on what sort of crime that is, because I'm not very keen on thrillers unless they have a specific theme to it. And my go-to thing is always the book has to have a queer character or some sort of queer theme or LGBTQ plus theme to it. I read a lot of epic fantasy novels, and some of them do not have queer themes or queer characters in them, but I still enjoyed them. So for me to pick the book, it has to be either recommended by someone who I really trust, or it has to be the book by the author that I read previously, or it has to fall under queer or LGBTQ plus theme. Sometimes it's very difficult for me to find new reads just because I love reading fantasy novels with queer character in it. And you know what? It's still, even though in this age and century, it's still very difficult to find those books. I mean, it's not as bad as it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but still, there are a lot of queer characters in YA, especially contemporary novels, but not that many in adult fantasy books. And it makes me really sad because adult fantasy is my go-to genre, and I do love crime, as I mentioned before, and I do love specific authors that write also like gay romance slash crime type of novels, and they're also my go-to authors as well. But at the same time, unless there is something, absolutely unique about the book, I will not pick it up. As I mentioned before, I discovered BookTube last year, and obviously it affected a lot in terms of what I read, and mostly it affected the type of genre that I go for. I've never read YA, especially YA contemporary, that much before, and last year it sort of just exploded for me. I started reading a lot of YA, I read a lot of coming of age, coming out stories, and I read also YA fantasy novels. Some of them were really good, but others were it was pretty much hit and miss for me. I did enjoy what I read, but I do prefer adult fantasy as a genre as a whole. Because of BookTube and because of the book outlet that I also discovered last year, I started buying a lot of books that right now I'm not really sure I would be reading, or I most probably will read them at some point, but I will read them just once and I will never read them again. And that's another thing that changed for me last year, because previously I used to buy books only by the authors whose books I've read before, and now I just randomly pick up books whenever I see something highly recommended on BookTube, and I'm trying to stop myself from compulsively buying every single thing which sounds appealing. It's really hard, to be honest, and I know that a lot of people mention the same problem that they have with book buying. At the same time, I find that in terms of my go-to genres, nothing has really changed. It's still fantasy and it's still queer literature, but at the same time, I try to explore other genres, but mostly whenever I go for YA, I still expect them to fall under either LGBTQ+ or fantasy genres. And you know what, even though YA has a lot of coming of age, coming out of type of stories, there are a lot of queer characters in YA literature right now, at the same time, it doesn't always do what I expect it to do for me, and sometimes I find those books a bit repetitive in style, and there are a lot of coming of age stories, and whenever you read 1 or 2 or 3 novels, it's fine, but when you read 10, 20 or 30, and when you get to a next novel and it's basically the same plot, the same twist, and the same type of romance or the same type of relationship or the same type of problems that you read in previous 20 or 30 books, it just stops working for me. And right now I feel as if YA contemporary is probably my least favorite genre, even though I would still read coming of age and coming out type of stories, but only if they're only if they're written really well. Whenever I go into a bookstore and I find a book that I feel might fall under my favorite genres, I usually check it out on Goodreads, and the only thing that I check for, I didn't go for summaries, I look at the overall rating, and I usually prefer to buy books that are higher than 3.7 or 3.8. So if the book is at 3.6, I still might buy it, because I know that there is a very small difference between 3.6 and 3.8, but still if I see that the book has 3.8, it means that it's enough of a rating for me to buy this book and to read it. Another thing that I check on Goodreads before buying a book is tags. I usually just scroll on my phone down. I'm still not sure how Goodreads works in terms of tags, whether those are tags that the author picks up themselves, or if it's something that the reader can put, like tag the book specifically. I'm still not sure, but I always go down to check whether it has one of the things that I'm looking for, and that's usually queer or LGBT or fantasy, epic fantasy specifically. So as you can see, I have a rather specific taste. which is not a bad thing, by the way. It's just I'm very happy about my taste, and I love reading books that have queer characters in them, and it just, for me, it kind of narrows down what I read. I still read hyped books, I still read popular series, I still go for books which are highly recommended on BookTube, or just there is just a lot of hype around them. Say series like The Divergent. I read the Divergent books only last summer, and you know, I quite enjoyed them. They were not perfect by any means, but they were quite well written for me to, you know, go and buy them. So I enjoyed them. I may even read them again. And by the way, Allegiant is my favorite book, for the record. One of the things that I never do is I never pick up the book and look at the ending without reading the book. I never do that, like, ever. I would never do that. And I have a friend who always does it because she wants to know what will happen to the main character, so she can prepare herself, and I cannot deal with that. I just cannot. She does that in the bookstores a lot, and it just freaks me out because spoilers. I cannot handle spoilers. I almost never read reviews before picking up a book. I just look at the overall rating on Goodreads just to judge whether I will like this book or not, and I look at the tags, but I skip reviews. But once I finish reading the book, I always go to Goodreads to check what people thought about it. The only thing that I pay attention to is the most recent ratings on Goodreads. I find that it's a very good indicator, especially with indie authors, on whether if someone says, oh, I love this book, but they were provided with ARC to review it, and then there is someone else who purchased the book and didn't like it, there is a high chance that that might be a not very good or a not very appealing read for me, if it makes any sense. I try not to read anybody's opinions or reviews before I actually read the book for myself. As an example of an overhyped book that did not leave to any expectations for me was Illuminate by Jay Kristoff and Annie Kaufman. I read this book last year after every single YouTuber that I watch, every single one of them. Everyone that I watched was raving about the style, character development, plot twist, and you know what? I was so bored by the end of this book. I finished it, and I really enjoyed the format, but the plot was so bad that I gave 2 stars to the book for the plot and 4 stars for the overall formatting and the way the book was composed, which resulted in an average rating of 3 stars. And I still feel that those 3 stars were way too much for this book. And I have no idea why everyone is so in love with this novel. I'm so glad that I didn't buy it and I got it from the library. I might read book number 2 in the series, but at the same time, it's just, if it's going to be the same format as the book number 1, it just gave me a headache at some point. You know, I'm still not sure whether I want to do a full video review of Illuminate because it's been months since I read it, but my opinion hasn't changed, and I did write a full review of it on my blog. I might link it down below for you just to have a look at it. So that was an example of a book which was really overhyped on BookTube, and it has still a very high rating on Goodreads, but at the same time, it just did nothing for me. Another example about why I prefer to stay away from the people's opinions and from you know, book reviews and in general is just I prefer to form my own opinion on books. And when I read the Divergent series, which happened only last year, and for some reason I kind of managed to avoid spoilers till the very end. I did not spoil myself the ending of Allegiant. It was quite amazing how I managed to do that, probably because I've never really I was not in the fandom, or I was not reading the books when everyone else was reading it. So when I was reading it last year, it was quite I think just a few years passed since the books came out, which means that the hype kind of died down But whenever someone talks about the book endings or something that they would have preferred to change in the book, and I saw several people do those tags on BookTube, I noticed that everyone mentions A Legend just because of the ending. And you know what? When I read the trilogy, A Legend was my favorite book. I just want to give enormous kudos to Veronica Roth for pulling it off, for doing what she did in the Allegiant, and I think it was the best written book out of all trilogy. A lot of people say that The Love Insurgent, and that was my least favorite book just because of the narrative was a bit convoluted, and Trace was just all over the place for me. And Divergent was a good book, but like as a good start for the series, but Insurgent was not as good, and Allegiant was absolutely perfect. And when I went to Goodreads to check the rating, I found that Allegiant has the lowest rating out of all 3 books. And you know what? That's one of the reasons why I prefer to know as little as possible about a book before reading it, because I know that a lot of people got really frustrated by the ending of The Legend, but at the same time it was so well done and it made such a perfect sense. I just applaud Veronica Roth for doing that, and I really enjoyed the book and I enjoyed everything about it. And when I went to see the rating, and when I think about Illuminate, that had no plot and no character development and basically nothing, and I look at the Allegiant, which was amazing, and the rating of Allegiant is way below Illuminate, I don't even know what to say. Yeah, this is it, guys. I'm sorry if this video is a bit all over the place, but I just wanted to talk about spoilers and about the way how I pick the books, what are my go-to tags are, or genres, or what type of books I prefer, and how I pick them. And I just want to know what you think about it. How do you pick books? Do you go based on your friends' recommendations, or you just go based on Goodreads, or you just have your go-to authors and you do not venture out? Let me know down below, and I hope to see you very soon. Bye!